The music stopped, and the air turned to glass. A sharp crack echoed through the garden, freezing every guest under the golden Virginia sunset. Ethan, trembling, touched his stinging cheek, his mother's handprint burning into his skin. He hadn't meant for it to happen like this, not at Caleb's wedding, not in front of everyone. But when Caleb, his best friend since high school, had pulled him into a quiet corner of the reception to confess his love, Ethan's heart had answered before his mind could catch up. They'd kissed, hidden behind a curtain of fairy lights, thinking no one would see. But his mother, Diane, had seen everything. "Ethan James Harper, how dare you?" Diane's voice sliced through the crowd, her face a mask of fury and shame. She stormed toward him, her floral dress swaying like a warning flag. "You're ruining this day, ruining everything." Ethan's chest tightened. At 24, he'd spent years hiding who he was, especially from her. Diane, a pillar of their small-town Virginia church, had always preached love but practiced judgment. Growing up, Ethan had heard her whisper about those people with a curled lip, her Bible clutched like a shield. He'd learned to bury his truth deep, but Caleb had always been his exception, the one person who made him feel whole. Caleb, now 25, stood beside him, his groom's tuxedo slightly rumpled from their stolen moment. His dark eyes burned with defiance, but his hand found Ethan's, squeezing tightly. "Mrs. Harper, this isn't the time," Caleb said, his voice low but steady. "Let's talk somewhere private." "Private?" Diane spat, her voice rising. "You think you can sneak around, defiling my son, and I'll just stand here?" The crowd parted, guests whispering, their champagne glasses forgotten. Ethan's younger sister, Lily, hovered nearby, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan's throat closed. He wanted to disappear, to rewind the night to before he'd let himself hope. But Caleb's grip anchored him. "Mom, please," Ethan whispered. "I love him." The words hung in the air, fragile and true. Diane's face contorted, and before Ethan could brace himself, her hand flew, striking his cheek with a force that echoed louder than the music ever had. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lily cried out, "Mom, stop!" But it was Caleb who stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Mrs. Harper," he said, every word deliberate, "you just struck the man I love. And I promise you, this moment will change everything." The garden fell silent, every eye on Caleb. His bride, Sarah, stood frozen near the altar, her white dress glowing in the twilight. Ethan's heart pounded, hadn't meant to ruin her day, too. But Caleb's words carried a weight that held the room captive, a promise of something bigger than anger, something that might just rewrite their story. Ethan had known Caleb since they were 16, two misfits in a Virginia high school where football reigned and difference was a sin. Caleb, with his quick smile and fearless heart, had been the star quarterback, but he'd never fit the mold. He'd sneak Ethan into the locker room after practice to talk about books, dreams, anything but the game. They'd lie on the bleachers under the stars, sharing secrets no one else could hold. Ethan had fallen for him then, but he'd never dared say it. Caleb's coming out at 18 had shaken their small town. He'd done it quietly, telling only those closest to him, but rumors spread like wildfire. Diane had forbidden Ethan from seeing him, calling Caleb a bad influence. But Ethan had defied her in secret, meeting Caleb at the old oak by the river, where they'd carve their initials into the bark and dream of a world that wouldn't judge them. Now, 7 years later, Caleb was marrying Sarah, his college sweetheart, in a wedding that was supposed to be perfect. Ethan had been invited as the best man, a role that felt like both an honor and a knife to the heart. He'd spent weeks practicing his smile, hiding the ache of watching the man he loved vow to love someone else. But when Caleb had pulled him aside during the reception, whispering, "I can't do this without you, Ethan. I love you, always have," everything had changed. Ethan's cheeks still burned as he stood in the garden, Caleb's hand in his. Diane's slap had torn open years of silence, and now the truth was raw and exposed. He glanced at Sarah, whose face was unreadable, her hands clutching her bouquet like a lifeline. Guilt twisted in Ethan's gut. He hadn't meant to hurt her, but he couldn't unlove Caleb. "Ethan, we need to go," Caleb said softly, his thumb brushing Ethan's knuckles. "This isn't over." Diane stepped closer, her voice shaking. "You're my son, Ethan. You can't choose this sin." "It's not a choice, Mom," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "It's who I am." The crowd was a blur of faces, some shocked, some sympathetic, some judging. Lily ran to Ethan's side, her 17-year-old face streaked with tears. "I'm with you, Ethan," she whispered, glaring at their mother. "You don't deserve this." Caleb turned to Sarah, his expression torn. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't plan this, but I can't lie anymore." Sarah's eyes met his, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might scream. But she only nodded, her voice barely audible. "I need time, Caleb. But I'm not your enemy." The weight of her words settled over Ethan like a lifeline. He didn't know what would happen next, whether Caleb would walk away from his wedding, whether Diane would ever look at him again, or whether this moment would break them all. But as Caleb led him away from the crowd, their hands still clasped, Ethan felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he wasn't hiding. Caleb's car smelled of leather and pine air freshener, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, his cheeks still stinging, staring out at the Virginia countryside blurring past. The silence between them was heavy, but Caleb's hand rested on Ethan's knee, a quiet anchor. "Where are we going?" Ethan finally asked, his voice hoarse. "Somewhere we can breathe," Caleb replied, his eyes fixed on the road. "My old cabin by the lake. No one will find us there." Ethan nodded, though his mind was a storm. The image of his mother's hand, the sound of her slap, replayed endlessly. He'd always known she'd react badly, but the reality was sharper than he'd imagined. And Sarah, her quiet acceptance, had unnerved him more than anger would have. What did it mean for Caleb? For them? The cabin was a small, weathered thing nestled among pines, a place Caleb's family had owned for years. They'd spent summers there as teens, fishing and laughing until the stars came out. Now, as Caleb unlocked the door, the familiar creak felt like a step back in time. Inside, it was sparse but warm, with a worn couch and a stone fireplace. Caleb lit a fire, the crackle filling the silence. "Talk to me, Ethan," Caleb said, sitting beside him. "What's going through your head?" Ethan's throat tightened. "I ruined your wedding. Sarah's wedding. Everything." Caleb shook his head. "You didn't ruin anything. I did. I should have been honest with Sarah, with myself, long before today." Ethan looked at him, searching his face. Caleb's dark eyes held a mix of guilt and determination, his jaw set in that stubborn way Ethan had always loved. "Why now?" Ethan asked. "Why tell me you love me today?" Caleb ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "Because I was a coward. I thought marrying Sarah would fix me, make me normal. But standing at that altar, all I could think about was you. I couldn't say those vows knowing I'd be lying to her and to you. Ethan's heart ached. He wanted to believe Caleb, to fall into the promise of his words, but fear clung to him. What happens now? Your family. Sarah, my mom'll never accept this. Caleb leaned closer, his voice fierce. I don't care about them right now. I care about you. About us. The firelight danced across Caleb's face, and Ethan felt the pull of years of unspoken love. He reached out, touching Caleb's cheek, and for a moment, they were just two boys by the river again, dreaming of a world that was theirs. Caleb leaned in, and their kiss was soft but urgent, a reclaiming of something they'd both buried. But the world outside wouldn't wait. Ethan's phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from Lily, begging him to call, and missed calls from his mother. He ignored them, but the weight of her disapproval pressed against his chest. Diane had always been his rock, even when her love came with conditions. Could he lose her for this? Caleb's phone lit up too, Sarah's name flashing. He hesitated, then answered. Sarah, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. Ethan couldn't hear her response, but Caleb's face tightened, and he nodded. I understand. I'll talk to you tomorrow. What did she say? Ethan asked when Caleb hung up. She's hurt, but she's not angry. She said she needs time to figure out what's next. Caleb's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his guilt. She deserves better than me lying to her. Ethan nodded, his own guilt mirroring Caleb's. They sat in silence, the fire crackling, until Caleb spoke again. Ethan, I want a life with you. But I need to know you're in this, too. It's not going to be easy. Ethan's heart raced. He'd spent so long hiding, so long afraid. But looking at Caleb, he saw a future worth fighting for. I'm in, he said, his voice steady for the first time that night. But we need to face the me mom. Sarah, everyone. Caleb nodded, squeezing his hand. We will. Together. They stayed up late, talking about the past, the future, and the messy present. Ethan told Caleb about the nights he'd cried himself to sleep, terrified of his own heart. Caleb confessed how he'd almost told Ethan he loved him 100 times, but stopped himself, afraid of losing him. The cabin became their sanctuary, a place where the world's judgment couldn't reach. But morning brought reality crashing back. Ethan's phone buzzed again, Lily, this time with a voice message. Ethan, Mom's a mess. She's saying awful things, but I think she's scared. Please come home. Ethan's stomach twisted. He didn't want to face Diane, but he couldn't abandon Lily. We should go back, he said to Caleb. I need to see my sister. Caleb agreed, and they drove back to town, the sunrise painting the sky in hues of hope and dread. Ethan didn't know what awaited them, but with Caleb beside him, he felt a flicker of courage. This was only the beginning. The Harper house loomed at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, its white picket fence a lie of perfection. Ethan's hands shook as he knocked, Caleb standing close behind him. Lily opened the door, her eyes red but fierce. She's in the living room, she whispered, hugging Ethan tightly. I'm so glad you're here. Inside, Diane sat rigid on the couch, a Bible open in her lap. Her face was pale, her lips a thin line. Ethan, she said, not looking up. You've made your choice clear. Ethan's chest ached. Mom, I didn't choose to be this way. I just chose to stop hiding. Diane's eyes snapped to his, sharp with pain. You think this is about you? This is about our family, our faith, our reputation. Do you know what people are saying? Caleb stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Mrs. Harper, what people say doesn't change who Ethan is. Or who I am. Diane's gaze flicked to Caleb, her voice icy. You've poisoned my son. You had a bride, a future. Why drag him into this? Because I love him, Caleb said simply. And I'm done pretending I don't. Lily hovered near the doorway, her voice small. Mom, why can't you just listen to him? He's still Ethan. Diane's hands trembled, clutching the Bible tighter. The Bible says. I know what it says. Ethan interrupted, his voice shaking but strong. I've read it, too. But I also know God made me this way, and I can't believe he'd want me to live a lie. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling like dust. Diane's face softened for a moment, then hardened again. You're choosing a path of sin, Ethan. I can't support that. Ethan's heart cracked, but he held her gaze. I'm choosing a path of love. If you can't see that, I don't know how to reach you. Lily stepped forward, tears streaming. Mom, you slapped him. At a wedding. How is that love? Diane flinched, her eyes dropping to the floor. For the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of doubt in her. But before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Lily answered it, and Sarah stepped inside, her face composed but pale. Sarah, Caleb said, his voice thick with guilt. You didn't have to come. I did, she said quietly. We need to talk, all of us. Sarah sat across from Diane, her hands folded tightly. Mrs. Harper, I don't agree with what you did, but I understand being afraid. I'm afraid, too. Caleb was supposed to be my future, but I can't marry someone who's in love with someone else. Ethan's throat tightened. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. She met his eyes, her smile sad but kind. I know, Ethan. And I'm not angry. I need to figure out who I am without him. Diane's voice broke the silence, softer now. Sarah, you're a good woman. You don't deserve this. Sarah shook her head. No one deserves to be hurt, Mrs. Harper. But hiding who we are, that hurts everyone. I wish I'd seen it sooner. The room felt like a held breath. Ethan looked at his mother, hoping for a sign of understanding, but her face was unreadable. Caleb reached for his hand, and Ethan clung to it, drawing strength from the warmth of his touch. I'm not giving up on you, Mom, Ethan said finally. But I'm not giving up on myself, either. Diane didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the Bible. Lily moved to Ethan's side, linking her arm through his. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Sarah stood, smoothing her dress. Caleb, I'll handle things with the guests and the families. You two, take care of each other. As she left, Ethan felt a mix of gratitude and grief. Sarah's grace was a gift he hadn't expected, but his mother's silence was a wound that wouldn't heal easily. Caleb squeezed his hand. Let's go, he said softly. We've said what we needed to. Outside, the air was crisp, the neighborhood quiet. Ethan glanced back at the house, his heart heavy but resolute. He didn't know if Diane would ever come around, but he knew he couldn't go back to hiding. With Caleb and Lily by his side, he felt the first stirrings of a new kind of family, one built on truth. The next few weeks were a blur of whispers and stares. Ethan and Caleb moved into a small apartment in Richmond, a city big enough to feel like a fresh start, but close enough to home to face their past. The apartment was cramped, with mismatched furniture and a leaky faucet, but it was theirs. They spent evenings cooking together, laughing over burnt pasta, trying to carve out a life amid the fallout. Ethan's phone stayed quiet, no calls from Diane, only occasional texts from Lily, who was navigating her own battles at home. "Mom's going to church more," Lily wrote. "She's talking to Pastor Dan. I think she's struggling." Ethan wanted to hope, but each day without his mother's voice felt like a door closing. He threw himself into his job at a local bookstore, finding solace in the quiet stacks. Caleb, meanwhile, took freelance graphic design work, his wedding cancellation leaving him untethered from his old life. They were building something new, but the weight of judgment followed them. One evening, as they sat on their tiny balcony overlooking the city, Caleb broke the silence. "I got an email from Sarah today." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What did she say?" "She's moving to D.C. for a new job. She wished us well." Caleb's voice was soft, tinged with relief. "She's stronger than I gave her credit for." Ethan nodded, staring at the city lights. "I wish I could have apologized better. She didn't deserve any of this." Caleb reached for his hand. "None of us did. But we're here now, and we get to choose what comes next." Ethan leaned against him, the night air cool on his skin. "What if my mom never comes around? What if I've lost her for good?" Caleb's arm tightened around him. "You haven't lost Lily. And you haven't lost me. We'll figure it out, one day at a time." But the days weren't always easy. At the bookstore, Ethan overheard customers whispering about the gay kid from the wedding scandal. In a city, he'd hoped for anonymity, but small-town gossip had long arms. He kept his head down, but the words stung, each one a reminder of his mother's slap. Caleb faced his own battles. His parents, more accepting than Diane but still traditional, struggled with his choice to leave Sarah. "They keep asking if I'm sure," Caleb told Ethan one night, frustration in his voice. "Like I haven't been sure about you since we were kids." Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe they're just scared. Like my mom." Caleb pulled him close. "Maybe. But I'm not scared of this off us." Their love was a quiet rebellion, a refusal to let the world's judgment define them. They went on dates to quiet coffee shops, held hands in empty parks, and danced in their living room to old records. Each moment felt like a victory, but Ethan couldn't shake the ache for his mother's acceptance. One afternoon, Lily showed up at the apartment, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "I needed a break from home," she said, flopping onto the couch. "Mom's intense. She's reading all these books about healing people like you." Ethan's heart sank. "She thinks I'm broken." Lily shook her head fiercely. "She's wrong. I told her that. I'm working on her, Ethan. She's not as cold as she seems." Caleb brought out a pizza, and they spent the evening laughing, Lily teasing them about their gross couple vibes. For a moment, Ethan felt whole, surrounded by the two people who loved him most. But as Lily left, she hugged him tightly. "Don't give up on Mom. She's stubborn, but she loves you." That night, Ethan lay awake, Caleb's steady breathing beside him. He wanted to believe Lily, but the memory of his mother's slap lingered. He wondered if love could ever be louder than fear. Spring turned to summer, and Richmond buzzed with life. Ethan and Caleb found a rhythm, Their apartment a haven of small joys, morning coffee, late-night talks, and the comfort of each other's presence. But the outside world was never far away. At a local pride event, they marched together, rainbow flags waving. But Ethan felt exposed, half expecting his mother's face in the crowd. One evening, as they walked home from a diner, a group of men shouted slurs from a passing car. Caleb pulled Ethan closer, his jaw tight. "Ignore them," he said, but Ethan's heart raced, the words echoing his mother's judgment. Back at the apartment, Ethan sat on the couch, his knees pulled to his chest. What if this is our life? Always fighting, always hiding. Caleb knelt in front of him, his hands on Ethan's knees. We're not hiding. We're living. And every day we do this, we're proving them wrong. Ethan wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at him. He missed his mother's voice, her Sunday dinners, even her lectures. He missed the family he'd thought he'd always have. Caleb sensed it, pulling him into a hug. "We'll make our own family," he whispered. "Starting with us." The next day, Ethan got a call from an unknown number. His heart stopped when he heard Pastor Dan's voice. "Ethan, your mother asked me to reach out. She wants to meet, but she's not ready to call you herself." Ethan's pulse raced. What does she want? She's struggling, but she's trying to understand. Can you meet her at the church tomorrow? Ethan hesitated, glancing at Caleb, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay," Ethan said. "I'll be there." The church was small, its stained glass windows casting colored light across the pews. Diane sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly. Ethan approached, his stomach in knots. "Mom," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes tired. "Ethan, I've been praying. I don't know how to do this, but I don't want to lose you." Ethan sat beside her, his throat tight. "I don't want to lose you either. But I need you to see meal of me." Diane's voice trembled. "I'm trying. Pastor Dan's been helping me read different interpretations of Scripture. I don't know what's right anymore." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. Ethan reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. "I just want you to love me, Mom. Like you used to." Tears welled in Diane's eyes. "I've always loved you. I'm scared for you." "I'm not," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Not anymore." They talked for hours, not resolving everything, but starting somewhere. Diane didn't mention Caleb, and Ethan didn't push. It was enough that she was there, listening. When he left, he felt lighter, like a weight had shifted. Back at the apartment, he told Caleb everything. "She's not there yet," Ethan said, "but she's trying." Caleb smiled, pulling him close. "That's more than we had yesterday." Months passed, and Ethan and Caleb's life together deepened. They adopted a scruffy dog named Max, who became their shadow, curling up between them on the couch. They hosted game nights with new friends from the city, people who accepted them without question. But Diane remained a question mark, her progress slow and uneven. One Sunday, Ethan got a text from Lily. "Mom wants you to come to dinner." Caleb too. Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding. "She invited you," he told Caleb, disbelief in his voice. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Think it's a trap?" Ethan laughed, nervous but hopeful. "Maybe. But I want to try." The dinner was tense, the dining room heavy with unspoken words. Diane had cooked Ethan's favorite, roast chicken, but her smiles were strained. Lily kept the conversation light, chattering about school, but the air crackled with expectation. Finally, Diane spoke. "Caleb, I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing you." Caleb nodded, his voice gentle. "Thank you, Mrs. Harper. I know this isn't easy." Diane turned to Ethan, her eyes soft. "I'm still learning, Ethan. But I want you in my life. Both of you." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Ethan reached for Caleb's hand under the table, feeling the warmth of possibility. They ate, talked, even laughed, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt like he was home. But the world outside wasn't as forgiving. At work, Ethan's boss pulled him aside, citing customer complaints about his lifestyle. The warning was vague but clear: his job was at risk. When he told Caleb, anger flashed in Caleb's eyes. "They can't do that. We'll fight it." Ethan shook his head. "I don't know if I have the energy to fight every battle." Caleb cupped his face. "Then I'll fight for you. We're in this together. Remember?" That night, they researched legal options, finding a local advocacy group that helped LGBTQ employees. It was daunting, but Caleb's determination fueled Ethan's resolve. They weren't just fighting for a job, they were fighting for their right to exist. A year after the wedding, Ethan and Caleb stood in their apartment, surrounded by friends and Lily, celebrating their first anniversary as a couple. The room was filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of chosen family. Diane wasn't there, she wasn't ready for that, but she'd sent a card. Her handwriting shaky but sincere. "I'm proud of you, Ethan. Love, Mom." It was enough for now. Ethan had learned that love was a journey, not a destination. He and Caleb had faced slurs, job threats, and family tension, but they'd also found joy in the small moments: morning walks with Max, late-night dances, and the quiet certainty of each other. Sarah sent a gift, a framed photo of the three of them from college, with a note: "You're both where you belong. Be happy." Ethan smiled, grateful for her forgiveness. As the party wound down, Caleb pulled Ethan onto the balcony. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver ring. Ethan's breath caught. "Caleb, I'm not asking yet," Caleb said, grinning. "But I'm promising. You and me. Always." Ethan slipped the ring on, tears in his eyes. "Always." They kissed under the stars, the city humming below. The world wasn't perfect, but they were building something better, one day at a time. 2 years later, Ethan and Caleb stood in a small park, surrounded by friends, Lily, and, to Ethan's surprise, Diane. It was their wedding day, simple but radiant, with wildflowers and fairy lights strung through the trees. Ethan wore a navy suit, Caleb a gray one, both with rainbow pins gleaming on their lapels. Diane approached Ethan before the ceremony, her eyes misty. "I was wrong," she said, her voice steady. "I see you now, Ethan. And I see love." Ethan hugged her, tears streaming. "Thank you, Mom." The ceremony was short but heartfelt, their vows a promise to weather every storm together. When Caleb kissed him, the crowd cheered, and Ethan felt the weight of years lift. Sarah was there, clapping with a genuine smile, her own life rebuilt with a new partner by her side. As they danced under the stars, Ethan whispered to Caleb, "We made it." Caleb grinned, his arms tight around him. "We're just getting started." The world still had its shadows, But Ethan and Caleb had built a light of their own. With Diane's tentative steps toward acceptance, Lily's fierce loyalty, and their chosen family, they'd created a home where love was the loudest voice. And in that moment, as the music played and the night stretched on, Ethan knew they'd silenced the room not with anger, but with the unbreakable truth of who they were.